Hey there, my name's Niandra and this is a VOD sent to me by Nightwhisper, who is around 600 SR. Thank you to Tom and Chris for looking at this with me. We all agreed the biggest issue is that movement and reaction time are pretty stiff, and this then causes a lot of different problems. Nightwhisper let us know that he's left-handed and has a different keyboard layout. Instead of WASD, it's 8, 4, 6 and 2 on the numpad. We learned that to walk backwards, Nightwhisper had to take fingers off the other keys. Chris suggested using 5 instead of 2, and apparently it has been working out very well for him. With Moira, Mercy can put more focus on damage boost, but Nightwhisper's beam changing feels a bit slow and off to me during this first fight.
Damage increase.
Mercy's beam briefly stays active when not in line of sight. Nightwhisper could have flicked his beam onto Genji to avoid that brief disconnect, but not a big deal. Nightwhisper could have cancelled his GA to stay behind the pillar for cover, but I'm not going to give him too much shit for this death. If you watch enemy Hanzo in the kill cam, it kinda looks like he's just firing randomly and Nightwhisper just so happened to get hit. There are some deaths in Overwatch that just aren't worth analysing in depth, and you might as well just kind of shrug them off. Nightwhisper dodges Earthshatter but doesn't react further, keeping his back to it. It doesn't look like any allies actually got hit, but I still would have immediately span around just in case. Personally, I'm always a bit wary about positioning this close to multiple allies. You know, Mercy's beam is pretty long and can stay active for 3 seconds when out of line of sight. There are pillars and space to the right which Nightwhisper could have peeked from, and that may have set him up better for what's about to happen. Nightwhisper runs through a ball of enemies and is fine, but it's mainly due to the friendly Moira orb. I've rewatched this segment a good amount and honestly I'm a little stumped on what to say. Obviously, barging through enemies is generally bad, but sometimes crazy plays work. Especially in ranks like this, where players may not be quick to punish. I tried to think of some alternative plays to offer here, and one goes back to Nightwhisper being close to allies. Instead of here, he'd be here. Once enemies pushed up, he could back off to here with beam on Moira or Hog. He could then reposition to the left stairs fairly easily. Using Valk Wall down is always a crapshoot. It's not necessarily a bad play, but usually depends on your allies and then using their own ult or heavy damage boost. Nightwhisper flies to the top of point and stays very still, which actually does keep him unharmed, but I feel that's mainly because no one noticed. I'm not a fan of this positioning, but struggle to describe why. I think it's because his allies are moving around the point a lot and he can't really keep up with them. Once Valk comes to an end, Nightwhisper falls onto point, and I think it would have been worth moving to the side or something as Valkyrie was finishing. Various teammates die and Nightwhisper walks off point with his back to it, which denies us a lot of information. He ends up in this weird halfway position where he isn't on point and he isn't fully backed off. Nightwhisper pushes back up a few seconds later, but the enemy team caps and he dies. In King of the Hill, it can be worth staying on a point your team owns, even if the fight is clearly lost, to get those extra ticks. However, backing off and letting the enemy take it is also valid if you're wary of feeding or want to regroup. Basically, what I'm trying to say is fully commit to one, because otherwise this happens. One thing we noticed Nightwhisper does quite often is he'll reposition in ways that take him out of the fight or removes his line of sight on teammates. Moira gets hit by Earthshatter and this movement then turned to get to her is pretty slow. An alternative would be to climb over the right side boxes. Here could just generally be using damage boost a bit more because allies are fully healthed.
This is not the end.
Nightwhisper puts his heal beam on fully health Reaper for a second, then places it on Moira instead of just healing her immediately. In the middle of a fight, this sort of thing can be pretty easily punished. Brigitte ults and Nightwhisper repositions off point. I originally thought this was fine because he wants to get away from her, but Chris mentioned that if she had chased him, he would have been in trouble because there'd be no allies to fly to. Chris also said that Moira dies because of this reposition, and yeah, she does. I guess an alternative would have been to hover in this area, then fly to allies on point if needed. Nightwhisper loops a second time, and during both, his camera is positioned in a way where he cannot actually see what's happening on point. If he positioned his camera view to the objective while moving, it may help him decide what action to take when back on point. I personally like rezzing next to friendly ults like Dragon Strike or Diva Bomb because they can provide cover as enemies are hesitant to get close. I think that Diva Bomb combined with the stairs here could have made Moira a viable res, but I understand the hesitation with Roadhog and Brigitte being behind the enemy Reinhardt shield. I think this res on Pharah was doable. The only enemy on point is Soldier, who is to the right. If Nightwhisper had positioned his camera angle towards Soldier a bit more, he could attract position to gauge whether the res was okay. I much prefer this movement during Valkyrie. I personally would have used the pistol less. There is a few seconds where he's shooting at air. Enemy Reinhardt uses ult and it hits friendly Reaper, but Nightwhisper doesn't react. Reaper gets up and is fine, although I feel almost any other squishy would have been fucked here. If Nightwhisper had been healing Reaper through the Earth Shatter, he could have damage boosted the Death Blossom afterwards pretty easily. I think Moira was resable if Nightwhisper had used the left side pillar for cover or moved behind it while doing so, although prioritising beam on those still alive, perfectly fine too. I also think Nightwhisper needs to be a bit cautious with just walking directly in front of enemies sometimes.
4, 3, 2, 1. Round 2. Capture the objective.
Group up here.
For starters, fucking ecstatic to see damage boost at all in bronze. However, Diva has extremely high damage drop off. Even while boosted, chances are she's doing very little if enemies are on the other side there. Pushing up slightly ahead with Genji and positioning in that right side crevice area may have been slightly better. For my next few points, just keep in mind there's a fight going on in this corner. There is a direct fly path to Genji, however Nightwhisper steps to the right, then flies forward. During this res, I would have flicked my view behind to the area where I know people are fighting. Once res was over, Guardian Angel would basically be off cooldown and I would immediately be prepared to get back into the fight. Nightwhisper then walks with his back to his ally's last known position. By the time he turns around, quite a few allies are just dead.
Converge on the objective.
We can see that Roadhog destroyed Diva's mech and Brigitte killed her. We know that Diva died in the big health kit room from this and seeing her mech go down through the window a few seconds ago. Keeping track of information like this can be really useful. Roadhog and Brigitte are likely to now come to point from that side, and knowing this may influence where we position. Nightwhisper keeps healing Reaper while watching Genji take damage and even uses the pistol over helping, which, not to be rude, is kind of a bizarre play. It also means he pushes into an enclosed area, which should be avoided when the enemy team has characters like Junkrat and Brigitte. Positioning on point didn't look too appealing either, but Pharah was on her way back and Reaper was there too. Maybe shimmying here would have allowed Nightwhisper to help Genji and then move when needed. Being able to quickly swap from healing to damage boost is crucial, and the other way around is just as important. Pleased to see full health Genji getting boosted, but Nightwhisper is slow to swap once his ally gets hooked. Abilities in this game are accompanied by a sound effect and animation. You basically want to condition yourself to react appropriately immediately upon seeing them. There is a damage orb hanging about, but walking around via the health kit takes Nightwhisper out of the fight for a good few seconds. I think moving to the left here rather than right would have been better. It should be away from the Moira orb, it keeps line of sight on allies, and Mercy's health regen would soon kick in. Since Mercy's beam isn't attached to anyone, I'd consider taking out the pistol, especially because there's a Junkrat trap on the floor. Getting stuck was a bit sloppy, and if it hadn't happened, Nightwhisper would have gotten to Reaper in time for res. Also, if I was going to use Valk this fight, I roughly would have done it here. The speed may have gotten me to Reaper in time, multiple allies are hurt, and Moira's not quite back in the fight yet.
Gonna get a rest if you can.
I feel like working on turning around quicker would be really useful. Pharah is so vulnerable while ulting, and you usually just want to snap to her once you hear it go off. I think this is too late into the fight to get value from Valkyrie, and it'd be better saved. The team has some picks and the only enemy nearby is Roadhog, who packs off. We got some enemies here and 2 allies pushed up, but Nightwhisper's chain remains on the players far back. Valkyrie's range is 10 meters, and even though it's chained, sometimes you do need to take it off one ally to put it on another, just depending on the position of everyone else. Completely fine to heal once Valk is over, but Nightwhisper doesn't follow D.Va. He looks away, then moves his camera back, and we know how important it is to react immediately. During this little squabble, I really think damage boost should have taken priority over the pistol. Say Junkrat had damaged one of these allies, Nightwhisper would have to go through the swap animation and get his beam attached. Plus, boosting baby D.Va helps her get mech back quicker, which, you know, always good.
Form up. Group up.
Oh my god.
Damage amplified.
Nightwhisper has a fly path he can use to push up quicker, but chooses to walk instead. He then gets killed by Junkrat, which honestly just a bit unlucky. I think getting into the habit of using GA over ordinary walking is okay. It's faster and on a very short cooldown, so use it regularly.
Downstairs.
Starting over from the beginning.
We briefly see Genji is hurt, Nightwhisper then looks down, then back to Genji, while keeping his beam on fully healthed Pharah. Roadhog is ulting just ahead and Nightwhisper immediately pushes for the res, even though there's a good 9 seconds left before Genji respawns. You know what, maybe you guys can give better advice for this one in the comments, but I almost want to just write this death off. Like, everyone is positioned, so just, the fight is a clusterfuck. I guess it goes back to 20 seconds ago. If Nightwhisper hadn't gone for the res and played back or in the air, he may not have been hacked. He then may decide to reposition on the right side of the point instead of the small room. I think the main takeaway is just be really cautious about cramped spaces and consider positioning off point more often. Nightwhisper is shortly about to use Valkyrie while 2 allies are dead, and often that will be a waste unless you're confident or heavily committing to damage boost. It is going to work out in his favour, but more so because both friendly DPS also use their ultimates as well.
Come on, get that.
Heroes never die.
Damage boosting reroll is fucking juicy, but it also could have been used for cover to res either Genji or Moira. In a fight that wasn't this in favour of Nightwhisper's team, that probably would have been the better play. Also, with that Reinhardt, and a couple of other times too, damage boost should be prioritised over the pistol, especially when you're running Reaper, who's going to be a fucking powerhouse. Another thing, and it would have been risky, but Nightwhisper also could have used Valkyrie to position in the air and res above Reinhardt. As I kinda said, if the fight's not that heavy in your favour, gauging safety and going for reses should be one of your top priorities. And congrats on the win, Nightwhisper. In conclusion, there's a lot here, but I think working on movement and reaction time is the best place to start. Things like being able to turn around quicker or moving while looking at the team or that sort of thing, I think could just go a really long way. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day.